नमस्कार and good morning. My name is Sushant. आप सभी को दशहरे की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं. Wishing all of you a very happy Dashera. I know I come to you early morning on a Dashera. So we'll do a quick introduction and then we'll talk about the topic for today, which is cutting power before it shows. Now, my name is Sushant. I'm co-founder of a consulting firm specializing in NBFC and MFI transformations. The name of our firm is Easy Problem Solving, and the framework that we have created for NBFC transformation is called SARTHI, drawing inspiration from Bhagavad Gita. This framework aims to aid the MFI leadership, and by leadership I mean the investors, the regulators in this industry, to navigate through the challenges that the industry faces and to create a more robust industry for the upcoming future. Now that's on Sarthi. The topic that we have for today is cutting power before it shows, right? How do we enable an early warning system? So the way we will structure this discussion is I'll give you a quick brief on what Sarthi framework is all about, a quick snapshot. What are some of the early stresses that show up before we look at power, right? And what is the solution that Sarthi proposes? All in all, about 20-25 minutes of the discussion is what we are scheduling this for. So without further ado, let's get rolling on this. Now, what is Sarthi? Sarthi essentially stemmed from the fact that in our consulting work with large microfinance, marquee finance, microfinance organizations across India, we realize that a lot of times, especially with the current crisis, which is slowly ebbing now, which started in 24, we realize that a lot of the challenges that are faced by the industry actually show their green shoots, if you can call them, or early warnings much before the crisis actually hits or the number starts reflecting in power. So we thought, why not have a framework which is more forward looking in nature rather than it being a reactive or a point in time assessment. So with that, we believe that for this industry to become more sort of appealing to the investors, because that is one of the challenges that we see today is lack of financing or slow financing in this sector. Is we realize if we create stronger branch routines, they automatically translate to stronger PNL and thus create better equity stories. So all of our solutions are rooted in creating very robust, very predictable, and forward-looking branch routines, which can be managed, assessed, and will address any risk, before it becomes an issue. So in terms of a framework, it's a 4-pillar, 24 clauses framework. We assess any organization across leadership, process, people, and performance pillars. Within them, we have 24 clauses that we assess each organization in, and about 300 plus precision checks. Now, how is Sarthi different from any other assessment framework that we currently have in the market? Now, first things first, we are not a point-in-time assessment. Okay, it's an assessment which gives you a roadmap and a path to profitable growth. Okay, so and also there is a gradation of organization depending on the maturity level of implementation. So first thing, as you see the blue box, which is roadmap to snapshot, it's a 100-300 day execution plan, and it talks about future growth. Second is for every clause that we assess, we assign a very clear basis point assessment and its impact on the return on asset. So that as an investor and a boardroom and a CEO of the organization, you get a clear view if you undertake a certain operational improvement. What does it translate from a financial improvement perspective? We also understand, as we've done, we've led large-scale consulting transformations. We realize that the challenge or the real deal is not so much in coming up with a solution. The real bit is about coming up with an implementation of that, right? So when the tire touches the road, right, do you see the actual traction? Does it actually translate to results on the ground? So what we realized, especially for microfinance or dispersed operations in the NBFC spaces, is that what's required to operationalize any change is to have region-specific playbooks, right? So that the field force at any point has the wherewithal to implement the change, and they're equipped to execute better on the ground. Okay, so we create localized SOPs and playbooks as a part of our implementation plan, which helps in faster adoption of the entire thing. Now, looking at all of these three things, we also realize that to bring about a successful change in any organization, okay, it needs the whole of organization approach. You cannot have functions owning it individually. The entire organization has to come together to bring about a meaningful and a successful transformation. So what we do with the help of Sarthi is we create one thread for all. So from your field operations to the dashboards or the metrics with the board measures to the investor metrics, right? They're all tied up in one thread, and it's a matter of double clicking down to see, how does one metric translate to the activities which happen every day on the ground. Okay, so from an organization perspective, it creates an aligned organization so that everybody from a loan officer to the CEO is aligned as to what are the paths that they're taking. And in terms of visibility, everybody has a visibility as to how we are performing and what is it that needs to be addressed. What you show below is what does the board get in 60 days. So you get a decision ready ROI model. Clause to BPS math has spoke about it. Okay. And this is so primarily the aspects that we address through all of this is how do we make the asset quality better? How do we reduce PAR and other such aspects? The issue that we are going to touch on today is PAR, okay, or portfolio at risk, as it's commonly known. How do we address that? How do we make it better? Now, what we've seen over the last 1.5 years, if I may, is PAR has been rising, especially in the 30 plus buckets across the various players and across regions as we are seeing it. And there are measures being taken to address it, including early write-offs, companies cleaning their balance sheet, etc. But we also believe that while all of that is required and necessary to be done to get a clear assessment of where the problem is currently, we believe a lot of PAR can be made visible before it actually hits the portfolio at risk bucket or becomes a 30-day delinquent or more. Right. So what are the early delinquencies that we can look at? What are some of the stresses which are visible in the system? But given the spread of the organization and given the beat and the pace at which it operates, sometimes these early signals are lost and the organization does not have the wherewithal to act on it. And that's what Sarthi aims to do, is bring it all up to the surface so that it gets a view and it gets translated into actions. So for example, if you look at it, the center meeting dropout, which is one key part of any microfinance organizations or a key building block of any JLG, is a center meeting dropout is a very good predictor of how the repayment is going to happen in the coming cycles. So if we can address the center meeting dropouts, or conversely, we can also look at center meeting attendance as a predictor of future default. So if we start addressing it at a center meeting default level, we can address it before it becomes a portfolio at risk, 30 days past due. Staff attrition, we all know, is a major challenge in this industry. Now, how Sarthi aims to, because the challenge that faces is the relationship is lost or gained at a loan officer level, right? So if a loan officer goes, the organization is losing the connect with those particular set of customers that the loan officer was handling. And while the new replacement comes in, there's a challenge. Audits, while robustly done, etc., and a critical part, we want to also strengthen audits so that they highlight slippages before they become a risk, right? So what we see in audit, they look more at it from a compliance perspective. What we want to do is add an additional layer of compliance to operational excellence, right? So how does every audit clause translate to operational growth, and while keeping the audit headcount or the audit OPEX the same, how can we gain more efficiencies out of it? More about it in subsequent cycles as we talk about. In case you want to read more about audit, you can look at my last post, which I posted yesterday. Now, left unchecked, these quiet leaks or silent leaks which are there, which are visible but not actioned upon because there's just too much noise in the system, they become hard PAR in 60 to 90 days. So translating all of this, if you look at graph on the left, right, what you see, the yellow section is what Sarthi aims to address before it starts showing in the blue line, right? So the idea is to address all of these field level activities through Sarthi and see how do we proceed from there. Let's look at some of the forward-looking diagnostics. Now, currently across organizations, we have seen that the way PAR is addressed is through the delinquency bucket approach, right? So you have a 30-day delinquent approach, you have a 60-day delinquent approach, and you have a 90-day delinquent approach, right? Depending on that, it's a hard collection, soft collection, etc. What SARTHI aims to do is looking at, so I'm giving you a sample of just of these three pillars, right, which I spoke about in the previous slide, which is repayment discipline, loan officer capacity. And when I say HR stability, I mean HR as human resource, right? So what is the stability of the human resource? What is the governance, which is the grievance redressal mechanism that we have for human resource? And human resource could be anyone from loan officer right up to the CEO, right? What are the reviews? What are the staff attrition that you are facing? Now, looking at combination of all of these factors, can we create a district and a state level EWS, which is an early warning system, which highlights a red, amber, green, so that as management you can easily look at, is my given region, geography, village, state, etc., performing at a red, amber, or green level, and what is it that I need to address today before it starts impacting my PAR, let's say 30 days down the line. Right. So that's the whole focus. Now we create these heat maps not based on activity alone. So this is not a heat map which is reflecting it is 30 days overdue or 60 days overdue. What this is reflecting is a combination of repayment discipline, loan officer capacity, and human resource stability. Now looking at combination of these factors, is your given geography a red, amber, or a green, and given that it is a red, amber, or a green, what is best that can be done to address it? So you create a forward-looking indicator. That's the aim of SARTHI as a framework. How does it translate to results on the ground? I spoke about pain, right? Now, pain is something that you experience, right? The pain is something like a PAR, right? So you experience it, then you take corrective actions on it. But what's causing that pain, right? So fragmented branch routines, as I mentioned earlier, some branches are doing well, some branches are doing low, right? What we've also seen very clearly is, let's say if a given geography in the state of Bihar has a challenge, so it is not possible that all the branches in that geography are not behaving or behaving as bad as each other, right? There are branches who will be doing better at collections. There are branches who will be doing less at collection. There'll be pockets of best practices existing as to how they tackle there. But all of it is very tribal knowledge. Okay, it's contained at a branch manager, regional manager level. Our aim through this entire exercise is to precipitate the best practices and make it work uniformly across the organization, so that one, we are able to reduce your variability between branches, and B, we are able to create a more consistent experience across. Okay. We know that rising PAR and credit cost will create board anxiety, OPEX creep in support functions because you'll put extra resources for either audit or collection loan officers, right? It will lead to margin squeeze in a scenario or in an industry which is already hard pressed for its operating margins. What is the risk that we have if we don't take this approach? Weak early warning system will have stress escalate late. So for example, let's say if the organization decides to put all its resources into improving the collection bucket, you can improve it today. There's no doubts about it, right? You can get a 90 down to a 60 down to a 30. But if the branch routines are not improving, who is to say that the scenario will not reoccur, say 1 year down the line, 6 months down the line, maybe 3 years down the line? Now, this is one of the facts that was actually also forming part of SARTHI, wherein we realized that the stress in microfinance is almost periodic in nature, right? So every 4 to 6 years, we see the stress happening in the system. And then when we look at it downwards, some of it is political, some of it is environment driven. But at an operational level, the stresses are actually visible at a branch level. And that's what the whole aim of SARTHI is, to address it at a branch level, one organization at a time, so that we can create a more predictive environment for the entire organization. Now, looking at both pain and risk, how does SARTHI solve for it? So what you see on the right-hand side is you see gradation of greens, right? What we are also aware of, that as consultants, when we present a certain approach to you, as a leader or as an investor, you're interested in what will give me the results faster. So remember, when I showed you the slides earlier, I said I'll give you a 30, 60, 90 plan, and each clause will be tied to a basis point and the time it will take to get implemented and show you the results. So as leadership, whether you take our services to implement it or decide to implement it in-house, you have a very clear visibility of the time frame that you're looking at and what are the potential gains you can look at. Right. So if you look at clause level scans, which is aligning field operations with board metrics, structured EWS, then you have shared services enablement. Shared service is something that I would like to highlight, talk a little more about. Is we believe that the way forward is have the field teams execute on the ground. Okay. How we enable that execution on the ground should be done centrally. So our entire solution is a mix of centralization and decentralization. Data collation, analytics, early warning system should be done centrally. Field team should have ready to execute data. In addition, they should also have playbooks, which is what SARTHI provides, so that a branch manager, a regional manager, a state manager, down to a loan officer actually knows what to execute, that is the data part of it, and how to execute, which is the playbook part of it. The next part is recruitment redesign. Now, what we are aiming to do with SARTHI is we understand attrition is a very real, very bleeding problem, and it has been so for quite some time. The way we address attrition is we say, what is the impact of attrition? So you lose a loan officer, and with that, you lose the relationship with the customer. The solution to that, what we are proposing is a hire more, train faster, and have, as I said earlier, have the field teams equipped with analytic playbooks so that execution on the ground becomes very easy, and the information they collect gets fed back into your loan origin system or the sourcing system to make the whole thing robust. And whatever I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about it a little more detail in the subsequent slides. End of it, have a boardroom ready dashboard which will improve the investor confidence, so that today, while your organization has solved for collections today, you have also solved a branch routine so that the similar issue or the same issue is not going to recur in the future. So your confidence in growth is that much more sustained. Now let's look at PAR 30 or GNPA that we spoke about. It's a pressing metric. I don't need to spend time on it. You guys are industry veterans. You understand the implications of it better than I do. Why this matters? There's obviously a P&L impact. The credit cost is rising, as we are all aware. Lender investor lens rating pool pricing is driven by asset quality. The PSUs and the investors are still questioning the asset quality. How do we ensure that the asset quality improves? So while the regulatory environment will reduce the leverage of the customer, the asset quality improvement can come out about holistically when we change the practices at a branch level. Okay. How do we stop the early signal? Now, compared to the conventional approach of solving for PAR, how will SARTHI solve for PAR? We break up the entire thing into three parts. What will we as consultants do within 30 days? What is it that we'll do in 60-day time frame? And what is it that we do in a 90-day? Right. So for 30-day, our first priority is to stabilize the collections environment. Now, what do I mean by stabilizing collections environment? What I mean is we'll have a daily PAR stand-up, right? And what you see as 2.4.1 or 2.5.1 are the clause level indicators of SARTHI. So this is to give you a flavor that when we created the entire framework, we attribute each single clause to what it's going to address. Is it going to address a sourcing or a disbursement issue? Is it going to address a portfolio at risk issue? Is it going to address human resource issue? Is it going to do a support issue, right? And this is a support function, let's say admin, IT, HR, they also play a significant part in the success of the organization. So the first thing to do is have a PAR 0 stand-up. How do we ensure that any, typically an overdue gets contained within 7 days, day 0 to day 7? Because our industry analysis tells us anything beyond a day 8 has a 57% chance of slipping into 31, right? So you can address half of your 30 days overdue within the first 7 days of it being due, right? You don't need to wait for the next cycle. Okay, so how do we ensure a day 0 overdue? How do we manage the center discipline better? What are the operating dynamics, etc.? And all of this information is available at a branch level. What SARTHI will do is collate all of this, make a local regional operating playbook. At the same time, this information in the future will get fed back into your sourcing engine so that eventually your asset quality or the kind of assets that you're creating have better sustainable, and you have a better predictability of if and when and how the stress is going to occur. So what we are going to do in the first 30 days is arrest the slippage. Arrest anything going beyond 30 days. How much of it can be addressed right now between day 0 to day 7? The next part of what we do is, once that is done within 30 days, the next 60 days is something that we are speeding, that we are going to spend as a consulting organization, is to cure your acceleration. Okay. So what is it bucket-wise recovery playbook should look like? So we are of the firm belief, especially given the spread of the microfinance industry in any organization, what works in Karnataka does not necessarily work in Bihar. What works in Bihar does not necessarily work in Maharashtra, right? And within each state, we know that there are different pockets the way they operate, right? So what we have done with this is we've created recovery playbooks which are region specific. So it is addressing issue for that particular region. What it helps do is it gets the buy-in of the branch level, which is what you as a leader would want, right? The people adopt it and they execute it on the ground. And at no point in time will this be an additional branch manager, right? And typically that's where we see challenges coming about, saying, this is yet another checklist. I don't want to act on. They will put passive resistance, etc. So we eliminate all of that. And EWS triggers for 8 plus and 30 plus, right? What are the early warnings that I have on day 7 for a particular account or a particular region going into a 8 plus or a 30 plus bucket? So next, what we are doing, once you've stabilized your 30-day plan, is we are going into curing acceleration, so that we reduce your flow into 90 days and we try and bring those buckets down. Once we've arrested your slippage, we've accelerated the curing through playbooks. What we now do is we do a confidence rebuild in the organization, by which I mean is integrate MIS dashboard with repayment behavior. So at every activity which is currently being retained at a branch level needs to flow into LOS, LMS, so that it becomes a part of your sourcing engine and you have enough data available, which is then being actioned upon before you decide to act on the customer. Feedback of collections needs to flow back into sourcing, because sourcing essentially is nothing. Collections essentially in our way, the way we look at it, is nothing but a leakage at your sourcing level. So sourcing not done right is leading to collections. So what we want to do is create an infinite loop wherein any collection attributes go back into the sourcing engine, so that when you're sourcing a new area or sourcing a new customer, you are aware of what are the potential attributes which can lead to a risky customer. I'll qualify that with an example. So for example, you realize that let's say if I acquire a new customer who's dependent on say rice cultivation in the south of Bihar, right? And typically I have seen repayment stress happening in the July-August timeframe because of monsoons. It's a very fair indicator that if a similar weather pattern and the same income dependency is there in some other state, let's say UP or Rajasthan or Haryana, you have a fair indication available saying these are the challenges which need to be looked at, right? So you may want a mitigation plan, or you can anticipate this is the time that stress will come onto the system. So either you have a deferred collection plan before it actually becomes due. So you don't react after a flood has happened, you react before that environment or this climatic condition comes in. So this is just one of the examples of how everything works from a SARTHI perspective. Moving ahead, this is, if I have to depict SARTHI in a nutshell, this is what we do. You give us your present pain areas, we translate it to a branch routine, and by addressing the branch routines, we are creating a sustainable future. Because microfinance, or for that matter, any organization, it can be an NBFC, it can be any large organization in the inclusive finance space, the success of that lies in the roots, or the stability of that organization lies in the roots. And roots in this pictorial representations are nothing but the branch routine. So if we strengthen the branch routines, we make it predictable, the growth will be a given, is what our belief is. Moving ahead, what we showed you an example of was SARTHI's potential impact, right? On a par level. Now, can SARTHI work on all other aspects? The answer is absolutely yes. Today we are talking about par because that is the burning problem today. Let's say a quarter or 2 quarters down the line, when the lending scenario improves or your access to funds improve, the scenario would also be, can I grow faster, right? While you'll be fresh out of this risk, so they will be focused around, so can I have a risk and a growth balance strategy, right? So can Sarthi address all of that as well? So what we are showing you here is what are some of these strategic change, and these are not all encompassing. These are just a sample representation of driver strategic change. Okay, what are the research anchors? So when we were creating Sarthi, we did a lot of industry research, both India and global, to realize what are some of the opportunity areas which are being missed, right? And this is the information which is publicly available, being published by SROs like Sadhan, MFIN, RBI, etc., and through other research agencies. So this is information which is publicly available. So for example, if we have to increase repeat customer, right? I'll take that as an example. The second point, what we've seen clearly is, 42% of share is repeat, right? Give or take. That's the median performance across organizations. But your repeat ticket size versus the original ticket size is increasing only by 5%. Now that's a clear opportunity area. If I can bump up that ticket size by having better credit assessment, which is essentially flowing in from my branch, if it can feed back into my credit engine, right, I will be able to disburse more and at a lower OPEX because my effort of disbursement is now lesser, right? My cost of acquisition becomes lesser in a repeat. Similarly, reject mining. Typical funnel will have a 70% reject rate from the time that you source the customer to what you actually reduce. Even if I do a 5% conversion of a 70% rejections, right, I'm able to regain a lot of new customers without additional efforts. How do we do that, etc.? There are playbooks that we have for that. The idea of this is to give you a screenshot of this. Corporate shared services, we know the Indian IT service system survives, or rather has created a success story on corporate shared services. It is important for large organizations in the microfinance space, because some of it is dependent on the size that the organization operates with, is to have successful shared services model. And that's something that's our competence, because we come from that background, is to create successful shared services within the organization so that you can achieve economies of scale and you have a higher control on how they operate and how they benefit the organization, right? Now, each of these strategies, what you see on the right hand side is what is the ROA impact in terms of basis points and how much will be the P&L impact for the full year. So this is a simulation done for roughly a 1200 crore book, right? So on a 1200 crore book, if I take these 9 levers, I'll be able to generate about 17 odd crores, 17.87 to be precise, and a basis point impact about 151 basis points in 1 year. Now this, because we have a lot of belief in the system that we've created, what we are also aware is, the way we price the entire structure is we tie a part of it to a success outcome, right? And that those are discussions that we can enter into if you feel this is relevant and you want to get into a conversation of how Sarthi can help benefit your organization. That's something that we can look at in more detail. Now, with that, I'm almost at the end of my presentation. If you like what you heard and you feel this is something that we can work with or assist your organization in achieving, etc., I'll be happy to get on a call with you. You can reach out to me at sushant@easyprosol.com, or you can give me a tinkle at 9008 366 558. Right. I will be posting snapshots of this as we go along. It will also be available on LinkedIn. We are just in the nick of time. It's 11:59 and I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you once again. I'll take a quick few minutes pause. Should there be any questions, use your chat window and I'll be happy to address it. I'll take a pause. Okay. Looks like there are no questions right now. You can view, I'll be posting a recording of this session at a later point in time. Feel free to review it. If you have questions, concerns, or you want to get into conversation, I'll be happy to jump into one. and see how we can assist your organization. With that, I wish you a happy Dashera once again, and thank you for taking the time out. Till next time, Namaskar.